So I want to try to see if I can kind of explain how we use our numbers. We all know how to count and we know what these numbers mean, but I think a lot of the time we don't really think too much about what's going on. So, and then this causes problems when we look at other topics. So if I look at the number, let's say the number 245, we all know that that is a larger number than, say, for example, 5, and we know it's a larger number than 220, and that it's a smaller number than 246. But what does the number actually mean? I mean, it's made out of 3 other numbers when we write it down, 2, 4, and 5. So you've probably been taught this much before, that the 5 we call the units. But so I'll just label it first, and we'll just try to explain why this is being taught to you sometimes. And this is the tens, and this is the hundreds. And we would have, I'll make sure that doesn't look like a 5, okay. And we could have other numbers after here. Because there's nothing there, we can imagine everything else is a 0. Okay, so although we don't write anything there, we can imagine they're 0. And I'm going to just color code them maybe I'll color code it light grey, or maybe not quite that light grey. Okay, that's fine. Grey, so we don't actually really write those down, but if we did, that's what they would be. Likewise, there's decimal places, but we don't really write these down either. But we could do. Sometimes we actually do. But generally speaking, we don't. And they would go on forever and ever and ever as well. So it's important to realize what these numbers mean when we write them down. So I'm going to grey those out as well. So when I write 245, I'm telling you that there are 2 100s, there are 4 tens, and there are 5 units. So in other words, the 245 can be understood as 2 times 100, and we're going to use the brackets now, which is also something you mentioned, plus 4 times 10 plus just 5. So this is telling me that there are 2 lots of 100, 4 lots of 10, and then a 5. I could show this as a kind of a little diagram here. So if each one of those squares is 100, maybe I'll make that a bit smaller. I could, if I had time, what I would do is divide this up into 10 by 10 square, and then we could clearly see each square is 100. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do it like that. And then we're going to say that that is a block of 10. We'll do that in a different colour. And there are 4 lots of those. And then there's just a single a unit, which we'll do in red. Okay. Oh no, there's not a single unit, is there? There's 5 units. There's 5 of them. So yes, I'm aware that we all know what that means, but let's now think about what we mean when we write a decimal, what we call a decimal. Actually, this is a decimal number already, but when we use the word decimals, we really mean something where there's something after the decimal point. The reason why this is a decimal is because it's in the decimal number system. In other words, it's made out of the 10 digits that we are all familiar with. So there are 10 digits there, and any number that we write is used with these symbols. And this is, if I was to teach somebody how to count using the decimal system, this is what I would say. So you can go further. You can start to say this is 245.3. Well, now that is the number of 0.1s, or we could say it's the number of 1/10. So that would mean that now I would have to add 3/10 to all of this to give a full answer of what we've got there. So if I wanted to add decimal numbers, and they have a convenient, we know how to add, so like, let's say if I added 16 plus 20 plus 23. The key thing, the reason why we stack them like this, and we don't want to do them off, we want to make sure that essentially we're using, although we haven't made it clear, we're making a table here. In fact, let's actually do it explicitly like a table. So yeah, let's so I'm trying to add 16 plus 23. Okay, we know that we do it like that, generally speaking. Now that is a table, but it's just kind of like a very rough table. So how it would look if I wanted to do it in a table would be something like this. So I guess up here, well, again, this table is just like this number thing here, in that it goes forever and ever over towards the left and forever and ever over towards the right. So so we'll say this one here is the units. Okay, let's make that a bit bigger. I think I mistyped that as well. Yes. Those are the units. Hang on. Okay, let's make it all nice and central. Units. This one will be the tens, and this is the hundreds. And I could keep on adding columns to the left, and I will actually add some columns to the right as well in a moment. I'm going to colour this table in green, and I'm going to give it a more noticeable border. So it's 16 plus 23. So there is in the first number there's 1 10 and there are 6 units. In the second number there are 2 tens and 3 units. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add up these units, and I get 9. And I'm going to add up these units, and I get 3. So that's the answer. Now it gets, so 3 tens and 9 units. In other words, it's 39. Now it gets a bit more complicated, doesn't it, when I were to, if the sum of the units gets larger than 10. If instead I had to add 24, or let's say 25 to it, the problem we've got here is that in that one down there we're going to get 11, but we can't put 11 because we're only allowed to put one of our digits in this unit space. So we'd have to put 1, and then up here we use this notation where we say, well, we need to put 1 in here on top of whatever else we're going to get there. So we got 3, but then we've got to get the 1 that was from here. I meant to delete that up there. So therefore we end up with putting a 4 here. Oh, I've just changed the title of the board now to new table 4. Oh, okay, 4. Okay, so we're familiar with that. We know how to add numbers in that way. If I wanted to add decimals, the same thing applies. I'm going to color code this bit now in a different color. So let's do it in that color, because these are, we can imagine that being the decimal point. Okay, so let's put a decimal point there, decimal point there, and a decimal point there. But really each column is just like a placeholder for one of the digits, and depending on where we put the digit, it changes the definition of what the number means. If I wrote 16, but this time I put a 1 there and I put a 6 there, we now know that is actually 1.6, and it means a different thing to 16. We know when we think about it that the 6 is actually the number of 0.1s, and if I put something else after that, well, that would be the numbers of 0.01s, and this would be the number of 0.001s, and so on and so forth. So if I did the same sum, so that's 25, so I'm adding 25. And I'm going to do pretty much the same thing. I wanted to show you how it's basically the same thing as before, only we're just shifting the columns to the right a little bit. So again, 6 plus 5 we know is going to be 11, but we can't put 11 there, so that 1 gets written up here. Then we add the 1 and the 2, and we had 3, but then we add that 1, and we get 4.1. So 1.6 plus 2.5 is the same thing as 4.1. Okay, so I'm just going to pause the video there for a moment.